Hey everyone, and welcome to WDIM Plus, where today I will be breaking down the second episode of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier and going into detail about some of the characters introduced. With this series only being 6 episodes, the season is moving much faster than WandaVision, and I think we have a pretty good idea of the major players in the series already. Because of that, I'm going to break down these new additions to the MCU here and what they can mean for this series and the established characters we know going forward. There was also a massive spoiler concerning the end of the series that I will wait to share until the very end of this video in case you don't want to hear it. So far, I have to say I really like the series, and I think that it's doing a lot to build up the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Throughout the Captain America movies, the use of the Super Soldier Serum, as well as the Battle for Freedom were constant themes, and this series has just expanded upon them and made both seem more updated with this modern world. I think that both WandaVision and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier has shown us the effect the blip has had on the world, as we only really got a glimpse of it in Endgame, and then it wasn't really touched on in Spider-Man Far From Home. Marvel has done a good job recently of making their live-action universe seem more grounded, and this series is doing a lot of world building in that regard. I think that it is also smart how the MCU is showing how these larger-than-life characters still have to deal with the consequences of real life, and the introduction of one character in particular is a great example of that. But this is always more interesting when I hear from you, so let me know what you think of the series so far in the comments. Also, if you still have any questions about the series or any of the characters, feel free to hit me up in the comments with that as well. Remember, this is a new channel that I created from my main channel, What Did I Miss, that focuses on science fiction properties, so be sure to hit that subscribe button here if you have only subbed to the other channel. Also, if you enjoyed this video, smash that like button like you want to smash the new Captain America in the face. Alright, so let's get into my breakdown of the second episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, named The Star-Spangled Man. You may remember that the title of the episode itself is a reference back to Captain America, as this was the song that played in the first Avenger during the montage that shows Steve Rogers performing for the troops. This episode starts with our intro to John Walker, the new Captain America, who we learn is a former SAR QB that always won. This reinforces the all-American image that the military obviously wants for this version of Cap, after having issues with Steve Rogers and Sam Wilson in the past. I did go over John Walker in my character breakdown video before the season started, so if you want to see more about him and some of the other characters, I will link it in the description. But in the comics, John Walker started as a villain named the Super Patriot and then took up the mantle of Captain America for a bit after Steve Rogers was thought to have been killed. He was a much more violent version of the character, followed orders much better than Cap, and ended up being a pawn of the government at different times. He finally settled on the moniker US Agent and became more of an anti-hero that was even part of the Avengers at one point. This version does seem like he is a good soldier that wants to succeed, and he doesn't seem to have any superhuman abilities yet. In the comics, John Walker was exposed to a form of the Super Soldier Serum, but I will go into that a bit later. We are also introduced to Lamar Hoskins, who is another big part of John Walker's history, as he is his partner Battlestar. What's interesting about this character is that in the comics, when John Walker took up the mantle of Captain America, Lamar Hoskins became a version of Bucky, his sidekick, but as we know in the MCU, this Bucky Barnes was never Captain America's sidekick. He is still shown to be John Walker's partner in the MCU though, and has taken up the moniker Battlestar as well. In the comics, he also has abilities similar to those of Captain America, and I think that both him and John Walker will eventually get them as well. Captain America Civil War showed us that there are other versions of the Super Soldier Serum used by Hydra, and in this episode we learned the US government was continuing those tests as well. We see in the montage of Walker training that he is a brave soldier and he is very athletic, but again does not possess any abilities. After the intro of John Walker, we see Sam still working with the Air Force, and he meets up with Joaquin Torres. Torres is also a character from the comics, and he eventually takes up the moniker Falcon after Sam Wilson becomes Captain America. His backstory is really out there though, like he turns into a vampiric bird out there, so I doubt that the MCU will follow it too closely, but I do have a feeling he may end up being a version of the Falcon in the future. Bucky Barnes meets Sam there and confronts him about giving up the shield. As they argue about his decision, Sam brings Bucky up to date about the Flag Smashers. This was another character I went into in my character breakdown before the season, but I have a new theory about one character that I will get into when we get into the fight scene. I thought this next scene was funny, even though it was shown in the trailers. In the first Avengers, there's a scene that Iron Man and Cap share that is very similar to it, and I'm sure that this was done on purpose. I also thought it was interesting that Bucky removed his jacket arm before he jumped. This made me think of him falling out of the train in Captain America First Avenger, in which he lost his arm. The pair find the Flag Smashers moving some crates that look to be filled with medicine. While they are there, Sam calls Bucky White Panther, and he corrects him and says his name was the White Wolf. We saw T'Challa call him this when he gave Bucky his new arm in Wakanda, and the character also exists in the comics, but he's completely different. When Bucky is able to jump onto one of the trucks, he meets Carly Morgenthau, who is playing a gender swap version of Carl Morgenthau, who in the comics is the villain known as the Flag Smasher. In this series, the Flag Smashers are shown to be a group of people instead of just one person, and I believe this is because later in the series, Carly will actually take on the alias of another comic book persona, but I will get to that in a bit. While they are fighting, John Walker and Lamar Hoskins introduce themselves to Bucky and Sam as well as the Flag Smashers, and we get a really cool fight on the road. Sam and Bucky realize that the Flag Smashers are all enhanced like super soldiers, which draws from the story in Civil War where we saw that there were more super soldiers than just Bucky and Steve. Seeing as how Tyler Howard was trying to create his own version of the Vision during the blip to protect America from otherworldly threats like we saw in WandaVision, it stands to reason that others had their own plans to protect themselves. There is even a piece of dialogue in which John Walker lists off the big three villains, androids, aliens, and wizards, and then they add super soldiers to the end of that phrase. Hoskins reveals that they were able to find Sam and Bucky by hacking Red Wing, Sam's robotic companion, and if you remember in the first episode, Joaquin was trying to work on it too. I hope that this is not a clue that Joaquin is not Sam's partner in the MCU like he is in the comics, and instead he's actually working with Walker and the government. I thought it was also ironic that Red Wing is the property of the government, just like Captain America's shield is, so they can take it back when they want to. As we catch up with Carly and the Flag Smashers, we hear her whistle as a sign to enter a covert hideout. The sound she makes sounds to me to be the sound of a Songbird, which is also a character from the comic and one that I believe Carly will become eventually. Songbird in the comics has similar powers to a super soldier but can also create a sonic blast by using her voice. The character is usually a villain and has ties to Baron Zemo, a character we meet again right at the end of the episode. We also see that the Flag Smashers are seen as heroes and Robin Hood-like characters to some. At the hideout, Carly gets a text message from someone that knows they took the medicine and threatens to kill them. I also noticed that one of the Flag Smashers is named Lennox, and he may be the one that is killed at the end. There was a character named Hector Lennox who went by the name Left-Winger in the comics, so he may be playing a version of it. The character also has ties to John Walker in the comics as well as to his partner Right-Winger, Jerome Johnson, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of the other Flag Smashers has that name. Even though the characters are not the same, I love that the writers take the time to at least use names and references from the Captain America story into live action. Speaking of characters from the past of Captain America, we are then introduced to Isaiah Bradley and his son Elijah. I go into great detail about Isaiah's backstory in my prior video, which is linked in the description, but his grandson is also an important hero in the Marvel comic universe. Elijah ended up getting powers similar to his grandfather because of a blood transfusion from him and go on to become the Patriot and one of the members of the Young Avengers. I truly believe that the underlying plot of all these streaming shows is to set up the eventual Young Avengers vs. Thunderbolts movie or miniseries. The Thunderbolts are a team of villains that for a time pose as heroes and are led by Baron Zemo. All these streaming shows, including WandaVision, seem to be introducing members of these teams, as that show introduced Wiccan and Speed, who are Wanda's children, also members of the Young Avengers. Besides Baron Zemo, Songbird is also a member of the Thunderbolts, so it would make sense that she be introduced here as well. But the main character I think that is pulling the strings here is one called the Power Broker. In the comics, the Power Broker is the reason that people like John Walker and Songbird get their abilities, as he's able to basically sell powers to the highest bidder. In fact, I think this is who the Flag Smashers are stealing from currently, and that is who sent Carly the threatening text. Now, in the comics, a doctor named Dr. Carl Malice is responsible for developing the serum, but since the character was already used in the Jessica Jones Netflix series, I doubt we will see him here. So who is the Power Broker? In the comics, he's a man named Curtis Jackson who is a criminal that hires Dr. Malice to create a serum that allows him to sell powers to people. As I mentioned, he is the one responsible for giving John Walker as well as Lamar Hoskins powers in the comics and many others. I wouldn't be surprised if something similar happens here. But something about how the Power Broker showed up at the end of the episode seemed very much like a government operation to me, so I wouldn't be surprised if in the end it turns out that Thunderbolt Ross is actually the Power Broker, and this would lead directly into his team of anti-Avengers, Thunderbolts. A side effect of the serum was shown to make people unstable, so I wonder if taking the serum is what will turn Walker and Hoskins toward their darker sides. We get a peek at that darker side as Sam and Bucky once again turn down their help, and the Walker threatens them. We also get a shot of Baron Zemo and that Sam and Bucky are going to him for help. This is because they believe Hydra is involved, and Zemo was able to decode all of Hydra's secrets from the files released by Black Widow in The Winter Soldier. All in all, I like this episode a lot too. I think that the relationship between the two main stars is great, and I think they complement each other very well. If you remember, I did promise a spoiler about the series, so if you do not want to hear it, do me a favor and click that like button before you click off, but definitely click away. This spoiler comes from a release image of a toy, which is where most of these spoilers come from, and that is of an action figure of Sam Wilson as Captain America, which means that by the end of the series, Sam will once again take up the role. I guess it isn't a huge spoiler, as most expect the series to end like that, but still it is cool to see his comic accurate costume. Let me know in the comments what you think of this series so far, and if you think this is as good as WandaVision. Thank you for clicking on this video, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?